In the black silence between worlds where even light seemed reluctant to move, something began to stir. The warp howled, a cry that was not a sound but a distortion of all things sane. Imperial augurs flared to life across Luna's bastions, their golden dials shuddering under the sudden weight of anomaly. Deep within the Imperial palace, astropaths screamed in unison and tore their own eyes free, whispering of a star that fell where no star should exist. On the outermost watch station of Terra, a custodian named Awakens stood upon a balcony of black adamantine, gazing into the void. His armor reflected the faint shimmer of the astronomican's holy beam, steady as faith itself. Then, for the briefest of instants, it faltered. A single pulse of foreign radiance, alive, vibrant, and impossibly pure, cut through the psychic storm that surrounded the throne world. It came like a living comet, wrapped in a corona of gold and azure. Unlike the tainted meteors that sometimes spilled from the warp, this thing did not corrode reality, it burned through it. Vox sirens erupted. Dozens of defense platforms unleashed lances of energy, their beams converging upon the object. Yet every strike curved aside as though guided by unseen hands. Alekian raised his guardian spear, though he knew the gesture meant nothing against the will of gods. The falling light screamed through Terra's upper atmosphere, setting the sky aflame. Pilgrims on the streets of the Heliarch district fell to their knees, believing the Emperor had descended once more. Monks tore open their robes in reverence. Servitors froze mid-chant as their programming faltered before the brilliance that eclipsed all command. When the impact came, it was not thunder but silence, the kind that steals breath and sound together. Dust rose for miles. Basilica towers crumbled like parchment under divine fire. In the aftermath, a crater yawned where once stood a shrine to Saint Beatrix, its relic reduced to x 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 reduced to ash and 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 golden mythic. At its center lay a figure, bare-chested, smoke rising from skin unscorched. His hair blazed like a captured sun. His eyes, when they opened, were calm, alien, and filled with something the Imperium had long forgotten. Peace. The first custodians to arrive formed a golden circle around the being. Their voices echoed through vox relays as prayers of activation filled the air. Null fields were engaged, psychic dampeners pulsed, yet none could smother the aura that radiated from the stranger. It was not warp energy. It was not anything they knew. No, not anything they knew. One custodian dared step forward, his voice trembling through his helmet speaker. "Identify thyself before the throne." The stranger tilted his head, confusion briefly flickering across his face as though waking from a dream. He spoke, his tone was gentle, almost childlike, yet carried the weight of unshakable conviction. "I came to protect them," he said. "I felt fear, so much fear." His words rippled through the custodian's encrypted vox, incomprehensible in simplicity. Protection. Fear. Such words held little place on Terra. Before further inquiry could be made, psychic storm clouds began to coil above the crater. Not conjured by chaos, but drawn by the disturbance of balance. Stranger raised his hand instinctively, and the storm parted like a curtain, leaving a circle of tranquil light over him. Magos Biology's units approached, their servo arms twitching with nervous awe. Scans showed readings that defied categorization. Limitless cellular energy, no mutation, no gene deviation. It was as though the universe had birthed a being untainted by entropy itself. Word of the event traveled swiftly through the palace's labyrinthine halls. The Sigillite successors trembled behind sealed doors. The Custodes commanders convened in the Tower of Hegemon, debating whether this was a gift from the Emperor or a deception from the ruinous powers. Arguments turned into silent vows. None could agree. Only one truth remained. Whatever had fallen from the heavens bore a power rivaling saints and primarchs alike. The stranger sat quietly amidst the ruin, gazing at the endless towers of terror with the innocent curiosity of a wanderer. When a custodian offered him a hand, he accepted it without hesitation, his strength gentle yet overwhelming. Every touch radiated warmth, every breath seemed to cleanse the ash-filled air. For a fleeting moment, even the battle-hardened guardians felt something foreign bloom within their chests, hope. Then came the order from the deepest sanctum of the palace, sealed with the Emperor's sigil, bring the anomaly to the golden throne. As they shackled him in auramite bindings that glowed brighter under his presence, he did not resist. Instead, he smiled faintly, as though sensing purpose beyond the stars. High above Terra, Mechanicus satellites recorded the dying echoes of the fall. The data, later classified under 9 layers of secrecy, noted a final anomaly. At the exact moment of impact, the Astronomicon had flared brighter than it had in 10,000 years. Far below, in the quiet corridors of the palace, as the golden giant was led toward judgment, a whisper stirred among the servitors. It passed from one mindless tongue to another until it became a rumor carried by the dust itself. The Emperor had sent a son not born of Jean or machine, but of light. And somewhere deep within the machinery of the throne, a single pulse of golden energy answered. The custodians marched in perfect synchrony through the marble corridors of the imperial palace, their auramite armor reflecting the sacred light of the lumen arches above. Between them, the stranger walked in silence, his wrists bound by chains forged from the same metal that armored the Emperor's finest. The bindings hummed faintly, vibrating in response to the energy that seemed to radiate from his very being. Yet he did not struggle, nor did he seem afraid. His eyes moved slowly, taking in the architecture, cathedrals that stretched into eternity, golden statues weeping oil and incense, saints immortalized in stone yet forgotten by the living. The procession advanced deeper into the citadel's inner sanctum, where even air seemed to weigh upon the soul. Vox prayers echoed from the walls, mechanized voices reciting litanies older than most worlds. Custodians spoke no words, their silence was ritual. Only the faint rhythmic clang of armored steps accompanied them, steady as the pulse of a god. The stranger, Goku, though none yet knew his name, glanced upward as they passed beneath an arch bearing the sigil of the Emperor. The air shimmered faintly, as if reality itself resisted his presence. At the Hall of Verdicts, hundreds of robed figures awaited, lords of terror, high inquisitors, and mechanicus magi. Servo skulls drifted above them like carrion birds. At the center, upon a dais of obsidian and gold, stood the Captain General of the Adeptus Custodes, Trajan Valoris himself. His voice, when it came, was thunder softened by reverence. "You stand before the throne of man, outsider. Speak your name and purpose, that judgment may be passed." The stranger lifted his gaze. For a heartbeat, the chamber's vastness seemed to fade. "Ye don't know how I came here," he said quietly, his voice echoing with unnatural clarity. "There was light, then pain, now this." His words carried no deceit, yet no one in the hall could accept them. Truth was not a currency easily trusted in the Imperium. An Inquisitor stepped forward, his bionic eye glowing crimson. "The anomaly radiates energy signatures unknown to the Mechanicus," he declared. He calls it anathema to the Emperor's science. He manipulates it without the warp's taint. Such a being could be a weapon of chaos masquerading as purity. Murmurs rose through the ranks. Some bowed in fearful agreement, others watched in silent calculation. Goku tilted his head, sensing their suspicion but answering only with stillness. The faint aura around him pulsed once, golden and soft, illuminating the floor with warmth. The custodians tightened their grip on their spears, ready for violence. Yet no malice stirred in him, only curiosity, as though trying to understand the darkness of the place that held him. Valoris descended the dais, his heavy armor whispering against marble. "You claim no allegiance to the warp. You wield no sanctioned power. And yet you burn through the Astronomican's veil as if it were mist." He paused, circling Goku with the measured patience of a warrior sage. "If you are truly free of corruption, then perhaps you are something rarer than a saint, or far more dangerous." Goku's gaze met his, steady and open. "We don't want to hurt anyone," he said. "But I'll defend those who can't defend themselves. That's all I've ever done." His words, though humble, cut through the hall like scripture rediscovered. Even the servo skulls paused mid-hover. Without warning, the null field surrounding him surged. Psychers hidden behind leaded glass convulsed as the psychic suppression amplified. The auramite chains glowed white-hot, yet the stranger merely frowned and exhaled. The air rippled, then stilled. All instruments failed. The null field was gone. For a heartbeat, the Imperium's most sacred fortress trembled beneath the quiet pulse of his power. Gasps spread like wildfire. The Inquisitor drew his plasma pistol, but Valoris raised a gauntleted hand, halting him. "Enough," the Captain General commanded. He did not attack. He reacted. Then, turning to Goku, he spoke with tempered gravity. "The Emperor himself shall see what you are." The stranger blinked, the title resonating faintly within him. "The Emperor?" He repeated, and though the words were unfamiliar, some instinct deep within his soul stirred, a recognition older than memory. The custodians reformed their escort. The air thickened with sanctity as the group began their ascent toward the throne room. Past vaults that housed relics of the Great Crusade, through corridors lit by suns trapped in glass. Every step carried the weight of millennia. Every breath was filtered through faith and fear. As they entered the final gate, a portal carved from the bones of extinct titans, Goku's aura dimmed, yielding to the overwhelming presence that awaited within. He felt it before he saw it. A consciousness vast and sorrowful, older than stars, watching through the veil of eternity. The custodians knelt in perfect unison. Only Goku remained standing, not out of defiance but because his knees refused to bend under the crushing flood of psychic radiance pressing upon him. His body shook, his spirit did not. In that boundless silence he sensed something beneath the golden light, pain immeasurable and eternal. Then a voice, vast as creation yet quieter than breath, filled the chamber. "You do not belong here." The words carried no anger, only weary certainty. Goku bowed his head, his aura flickering softly. "Maybe not," he murmured. "But maybe I can help." The Emperor did not answer. Somewhere deep within the endless machinery of the throne, a single light flickered in acknowledgement, small, golden, and alive. The throne room stretched beyond mortal comprehension, a cathedral of gold and silence, where faith itself became a weight upon the soul. Endless pillars carved from celestial stone reached into the darkness above, each etched with prayers that had long since lost their meaning. The air shimmered with the heat of 1,000 votive fires. At the heart of it all stood the golden throne, colossal, mechanical, and alive, a monument of agony and godhood intertwined. Upon it, the Emperor sat unmoving, his withered form sustained by the sacrifice of 10,000 psychers each dawn. Goku stood before this monument, the glow of his own energy dimmed beneath the radiance of the throne. He felt the pull of a consciousness vast enough to fill the void between galaxies, a mind that had once commanded the stars and now was bound within its own dying machine. The custodians knelt, their golden forms bowed in reverence, but Goku could not bring himself to kneel. Not out of pride, He simply did not understand what such submission meant. He stared upward, his expression caught between awe and sorrow. The silence deepened until sound itself seemed to die. Then, without movement, without breath, the Emperor's voice filled the chamber. It was not heard. It was known, reverberating through every nerve, every atom of existence. "You are not of this galaxy." The words did not accuse, they declared. Goku swallowed, his throat dry though he had not spoken in hours. "No," he said softly, "I don't think I am." His voice trembled against the sheer gravity of the Emperor's presence. "I don't know how I got here, but I saw people suffering. I felt their pain. I wanted to stop it." From the golden throne came a ripple of psychic resonance that warped the air around them. The custodians flinched as the Emperor's power reached out, not physically, but through the warp, through the infinite. Goku's body stiffened as invisible currents swept over him, searching, probing, dissecting every layer of his being. He sensed it as a cold fire moving through his soul, burning away all pretense. He did not resist. Visions flooded him, cities burning beneath black suns, titans striding through oceans of blood, worlds dying in silence. He saw humanity stretched thin across the stars, choking under the weight of its own survival. And behind it all, he felt the Emperor's endless fatigue, the sorrow of one who bore the sins of 1,000,000,000,000 souls. The voice returned, quieter now, closer. "Your energy is not of the warp. It is pure." The statement lingered, heavy with wonder and suspicion. "You are a paradox." Goku exhaled slowly, the faintest glimmer of his aura returning like the pulse of a dying star. "I'm just someone who wants to protect," he said. "Where I come from, that's what strength is for. Not control, not fear." A tremor passed through the chamber. The lights flickered as though reality itself struggled to contain the exchange. The Emperor's gaze, unseen yet all-encompassing, focused upon him not as a god upon a supplicant, but as a weary monarch upon a ghost of what he once hoped to be. "Protection," the Emperor's voice repeated, tinged with something almost human. "You speak of mercy in a universe that devours mercy." His psychic presence grew colder, harder, as if recoiling from the notion. To protect one is to doom another. To choose life is to condemn millions to death. Such is the truth of the Imperium. Goku's fists clenched at his sides. Then maybe the truth can change. The custodians stirred at his words, shock rippling through their disciplined ranks. No one had ever spoken to the Emperor so directly, yet the Emperor did not strike him down. Instead, for a fleeting instant, the psychic weight lifted, and Goku saw beyond the throne, into a realm of golden flame, where the Emperor's true essence burned, vast and luminous. It was like staring into the sun of eternity itself. The vision seized him. In that brilliance he saw echoes of another time, the Emperor walking among humanity, not as a god but as a man, preaching unity, reason, and peace. The image flickered, replaced by the crushing reality of now, a god-king imprisoned by his own empire. Goku gasped, realization dawning like a blade of light through shadow. "You were human once," he whispered. Silence answered him, yet the very walls seemed to tremble with unspoken acknowledgement. The Emperor's gaze intensified, and for the briefest heartbeat, Goku sensed something ancient and buried within that vast presence, a spark of the man who once believed in hope, but then the moment passed. The aura around the throne darkened, the great machines hummed, deepening into a dirge. "Hope is the weapon of fools," the Emperor intoned, "and yet you are still here." The words echoed until they became indistinguishable from the drone of the machinery. The custodians rose at a silent command, forming a wall of gold once more. The air smelled of ozone and burning incense. Valoris approached, his voice low but steady. "The Emperor has seen enough. You will be examined further, anomaly." As Goku was led away, the great eyes of the golden throne dimmed once more. But within the labyrinth of the Emperor's vast and dying mind, a single thought remained, unspoken, fragile, and forbidden. For the first time in 10,000 years, the master of mankind had seen something that resembled faith not born of fear, and it troubled him deeply. The echo of the Emperor's words lingered in Goku's mind as he was escorted from the throne room, the heavy doors closing behind him with a sound like the ending of an age. The custodians said nothing. Their armor gleamed under the light of burning censers, every step measured, precise, inevitable. He could still feel the weight of the Emperor's presence pressing against his chest, a vast eternal sorrow that seemed to seep into the bones of terror itself. Yet beneath it, something faint had stirred, a flicker of recognition. They brought him to the inner vaults where walls of black marble drank light instead of reflecting it. The air was cold, perfumed with the metallic tang of sacred oil. Here, no servants walked, no prayers were spoken. Only judgment existed. The custodians halted before a chamber sealed by sigils of authority older than most stars. Valoris stepped forward, his voice steady but shadowed by uncertainty. By decree of the throne, you will undergo the trial of silence. If your nature is pure, you will endure. If not, your existence will be erased. Goku nodded once, unafraid. If that's what it takes to prove I mean no harm, then I'll do it. The chamber opened like a wound, revealing a sphere of void light suspended in the air. Its surface shimmered with scripture written in languages not meant for human thought. The custodians activated the containment field, and the air screamed as reality warped inward. He stepped into the circle without hesitation. The doors closed behind him, sealing away all sound. Instantly, the universe vanished. There was no ground beneath his feet, no horizon, no time. He floated in a black ocean of nothingness. The silence was alive, pressing, crushing, infinite. His heartbeat became thunder in his ears until even that faded. He reached out with his senses, but there was nothing to touch, nothing to sense, only absence. The trial of silence had been designed to strip away every tether of the soul, to expose corruption or weakness through the reflection of one's own essence. For psychers, it was madness. For mortals, it was death. For Goku, it was something else entirely. He closed his eyes and felt the stillness wrap around him. The chi within him stirred faintly, a gentle pulse of warmth in the void. It reminded him of mountains beneath blue skies of laughter, of friends who fought beside him. Those memories anchored him like roots through the dark. But then something moved. The void rippled not with sound but with thought. A voice not his own whispered across the silence, a cold mimicry of his own resolve. You believe strength protects. You are wrong. The words slithered like oil through his mind. Strength destroys. It isolates. You will see. He opened his eyes and the void took shape. Before him stood reflections, twisted echoes of himself, each bathed in shadow. They stared back with lifeless eyes, their voices merging into a single murmur. You could not save your world. You will not save theirs. Goku's jaw tightened. I've lost before, he said, his voice steady despite the emptiness. But losing doesn't mean giving up. The illusions lunged, their movements sharp and unnatural. Each blow landed without impact, each echo disintegrating into light as his aura flared. The golden fire of his spirit burned through the falsehoods. But with every strike, the darkness pushed harder. It tried to feed on his compassion, twisting it into despair. In that moment, he understood the purpose of the trial. It was not meant to destroy the body, but to silence conviction, to make him question the worth of his ideals in a universe that thrived on cruelty. He knelt, hands pressed to the void surface, and breathed deeply. This place doesn't understand me, he murmured. It can't, because I don't fight for power. The warmth within him surged, radiating outward in waves of gold. I fight to protect life, even when the world tells me it's hopeless. The light grew until it consumed the dark. The chamber trembled, alarms echoing faintly through the metal beyond its walls. Custodians outside exchanged uneasy glances as the containment field flared white. For a moment, all readings vanished. No matter, no energy, no trace of the anomaly. Then, slowly, the light dimmed. When the doors opened, Goku stood unscathed at the center. The inscriptions had burned away, the air shimmering with residual energy that felt neither warp-born nor mechanical. It felt alive. Valoris approached cautiously, his expression hidden beneath his helm. You endured, he said quietly. No mortal has ever done so unscarred. Goku smiled faintly. I guess that means I passed? The Captain General did not answer at once. His gaze lingered on the stranger's calm demeanor, on the faint golden aura still lingering around him. You did not merely endure, Valoris said at last. You changed the trial itself. High above, hidden within the shadows of the psychic observation galleries, the Emperor's unseen eyes watched through 1,000 instruments and minds. The results defied all logic, all doctrine. The being before him was untouched by the warp, unbroken by silence. For the first time in 10,000 years, the Emperor's will hesitated. Something new had entered his realm, something that could not be caged by faith or fear. And though no words passed between them, a fragment of thought flickered from the throne like a spark in the dark. This one is not a weapon. He is a mirror, And in the mirror, the master of mankind saw the man he once was. The hours following the trial were wordless. Goku was escorted through the endless corridors of the citadel once more, though now the custodian's steps seemed less rigid, less hostile. Where suspicion had once filled the air, there was now something quieter, unease tempered by reluctant respect. He could feel it in the way their eyes lingered on him, as though trying to reconcile his mortal gentleness with the impossible radiance that clung to him still. The chamber he had conquered remained sealed behind them, the inscriptions upon its walls reduced to molten streaks of gold. The mechanicus would study the phenomenon for centuries and still fail to understand. He was led to a sanctum deep beneath the palace where light came not from torches or bulbs but from the walls themselves, infused with holy plasma and the prayers of artisans long dead. There, under the watch of Valoris, a conclave of artificers awaited. Their robes shimmered with threads of silver, their mechanical hands gloved in sanctified oils. Between them stood a forge, not of fire but of liquid auramite. Its glow cast a molten dawn across the chamber, illuminating icons of victory, sacrifice, and endless duty. Valoris regarded Goku for a long moment before speaking. "You have survived the Emperor's gaze and the trial of silence. The Custodes are not quick to grant trust, nor to forgive intrusion upon sacred soil. But the Emperor's will is clear." His voice carried the weight of judgment, yet there was something softer beneath it, an ember of belief rekindled. "You are to be consecrated within the golden metal. It will not only test your body, it will decide if your spirit is worthy to stand among us." Goku looked to the glowing forge, feeling its heat brush against his skin like the breath of a sun. "You mean I'll wear armor like yours?" Valoris inclined his head slightly. "If it accepts you." Auramite does not bend to mortal hands. It remembers only loyalty. To the Emperor and to the light he once was, the artificers began their work. Servo arms descended, carrying plates of unshaped auramite that shimmered as though alive. Monks chanted the litanies of binding, their voices mechanical yet hauntingly melodic. The air thickened with incense so dense it seemed to coat the lungs. Goku closed his eyes, letting the rhythm of their prayers wash over him. He could feel the energy in the metal, ancient, patient, almost conscious. It was not unlike his own Kai, yet it spoke in a language of faith rather than spirit. At Valoris' signal, the ritual began. The molten auramite flowed around Goku's form, guided by unseen will. It hissed and burned, yet he did not cry out. The heat pierced him, not as pain but as memory of every battle fought, every loss endured, every life he had sworn to protect. The gold hardened against his skin layer by layer until the light became armor and the armor became part of him. Visions came unbidden. He saw the Emperor as he once was, striding across Terra's plains mortal and radiant, before the Imperium was born. He saw the first custodians kneeling beneath that gaze, swearing oaths that would outlast the stars. And in the midst of those images he saw himself out of place, yet somehow belonging. When the light faded, he stood encased in auramite that shimmered with hues unseen in the mortal spectrum. The armor had formed itself to him not as imitation but as reflection. It was lighter than air, yet he could feel its immense strength coursing through him like a living heartbeat. The custodians watching remained silent. Some made the sign of the Aquila, others simply bowed their heads. The forge's flames dimmed, and even the artificers stepped back in awe. Valoris approached slowly, his golden helm under one arm. For the first time his expression was visible, stern but human, touched by something like wonder. And no one outside the Emperor's gene line has ever borne the auramite and lived. Yet you stand here. Goku flexed his hands, the armor moving as naturally as his own skin. "You shall fight it," he said simply. "I just listened." The Captain General studied him, then turned to the gathered custodians. "From this moment he shall be custodian indeed, if not in blood. Viduth. Until his purpose is fulfilled, he stands as one of us." The words fell heavy in the air, binding as law. Goku bowed, though the motion was uncertain, half reverence, half gratitude. "I'll do my best," he said. Valoris regarded him for a moment longer before placing a hand upon his shoulder. "This galaxy, intention alone is a rarity worth honoring. May your strength serve not just the throne, but the light beyond it." As they departed the sanctum, the forge cooled into silence. The auramite that had not bonded to him darkened into stone, inert and lifeless, as though it had given all it possessed. And somewhere, deep in the machinery of the palace, A tremor passed through the Emperor's psychic network, a faint acknowledgement, a whisper without words. The custodians who escorted Goku now did so with heads held high. No longer was he an intruder under watch. He was a brother on trial by destiny. Yet as they approached the surface once more, the alarms of distant Vox towers began to wail. Pew. Reports flowed in. Disturbances on lunar readings of warp breach activity. Valoris halted, his gaze turning skyward. "It seems your proving is not yet complete," he murmured. Goku looked toward the heavens, his new armor reflecting the firelight of Terra's endless dusk. The faint hum of his Kai resonated through the auramite like a promise, and above, unseen by mortal eyes, something vast and malignant stirred in the cold void beyond the moon. The alarms that rippled through the citadel carried no sound of panic, only purpose. Vox channels flared with encrypted orders, and across the gilded corridors of the Imperial Palace, custodians moved like the turning gears of a single mind. The warp had shifted, and the cold eye of the astronomicon blinked uneasily. From the upper balconies, Goku stood beside Valoris, his newly forged auramite gleaming faintly beneath the crimson emergency lights. Outside the immense viewport, the moon hung still in its orbit, bathed in an unnatural haze that rippled like oil upon water. "Unidentified energy signatures," Valoris said, his tone measured even as his gaze darkened. "A no-warp breach should form this close to Terra, not without half the galaxy knowing first." Goku's hand brushed the hilt of the spear they had given him, a weapon meant more for ceremony than battle, yet it felt alive, resonating faintly with his Kai. He looked toward the void and felt it, a presence unlike any he had encountered. "Cold, malevolent, a something's coming," he murmured. "It feels like hunger." Valoris turned sharply toward him, as if weighing whether the stranger's instincts could be trusted. He saw no fear in Goku's face, only focus. "Then the Emperor's judgment begins sooner than expected," he said, activating his calm sigil. "Deploy the Vexillum Guard. No fleets leave orbit without my command." Within minutes, the palace's tranquil order became motion. The Custodes' warships, golden arcs of death and faith, rallied above the world. From the moon's far side, the shadow emerged. At first it seemed like a trick of light, a smear of darkness moving against the void. Then it unfolded, a grotesque bloom of corrupted metal and living flesh. Its form was that of a battle barge, once imperial, now infested with the writhing growths of the warp. The Eye of Horus burned upon its hull, freshly painted in blood. Goku's breath caught. Even from orbit he could sense the corruption leaking from it, a spiritual poison unlike anything he had ever known. "They're alive in there," he said quietly, "but not themselves." "Other Black Legion," Valoris answered grimly. "Servants of the Despoiler. They have broken the oaths of Terra before, but never dared come so close." His gauntleted hand tightened on his weapon. Until now, lightning flashed within the warp-torn sky as the traitor ship opened its hangar bays. Outpoured creatures of nightmare, drop pods shaped from bone and metal, descending toward Luna's surface like falling stars. Goku could hear the distant rumble as the moon's crust trembled beneath impact. The Custodes did not hesitate. Orders cascaded through the Vox in precise rhythm, each unit a blade within the Emperor's hand. Valoris turned to Goku. "You wish to prove yourself, stranger. Then stand with us now. Defend the sanctity of the throne or fall beside it." Goku's answer came not with words but with a nod. He stepped toward the teleport dais as the custodians formed ranks around him. When the field activated, the air split with light, and in the blink of an eye, the marble grandeur of Terra vanished, replaced by the grey desolation of Luna's plains. Dust and silence. The horizon was broken only by the twisted remains of defense towers, their runes still glowing faintly as they powered up auto-batteries. Above, the stars shone pale against the creeping shadow that now blotted half the sky. The airless battlefield thrummed with a haunting stillness. Then the first impact came. A crater bloomed in the distance, followed by another and another, each birthing abominations in ceramite and bone. Chaos Marines of the Black Legion emerged, their armor slick with warp residue, their voices carried across Vox speakers in blasphemous hymns. The custodians advanced in formation, golden titans amidst the gray. Bolter fire split the darkness like thunder. Goku moved among them, faster than any I could follow. The energy that burned within him pulsed outward in waves of gold, each strike sending shockwaves through the regolith. When his fists met corrupted ceramite, the impact shattered both armor and the demonic rot within. The custodians who fought nearby faltered for only a moment, awed at the sight of something radiant moving among them, like a comet given flesh. One of the Black Legion's champions stepped forward, his armor engraved with the symbols of the dark gods. His voice boomed through the void. "Another false angel to serve the corpse, Emperor. You bleed light, little mortal. Let us see if it dims when the gods feast upon your soul." He raised his demon blade, the weapon howling with the cries of trapped spirits. Goku faced him, eyes narrowing, aura flaring brighter until the battlefield was drenched in gold. When they clashed, the explosion lit the lunar sky. For an instant all was silent, and then the shockwave rolled outward, flattening everything in its path. Scar. When the dust cleared, the champion lay broken, his corrupted armor melting into sludge. Goku stood above him, chest heaving, the spear of auramite glowing white-hot. Around him, the custodians regrouped, their formation unbroken. Valori's voice came through the vox, calm yet edged with something rare, admiration. "You fight with a fire we have not seen in millennia." Goku lowered his weapon, the faintest of smiles ghosting across his face. "I fight to protect," he said simply. But even as the words left him, his gaze turned skyward. The corrupted battle barge was shifting again, its hull splitting open like a wound. From its core, a deeper darkness unfurled. A colossal winged figure wreathed in flame and shadow, its presence alone enough to warp the lunar surface beneath it. The custodians faltered, even Valoris' voice dropped to a whisper. "The Demon Prince." Goku's aura flared instinctively in response, golden light meeting the red glow of the abyss. The two forces rippled across the void, colliding in waves that bent the stars themselves. And from within the demon's laughter came words that froze the blood of all who heard. "I have waited an age to meet the one the Emperor calls his hope reborn." The void trembled, the void trembled. The battle for Luna had only just begun. The Demon Prince descended upon the lunar plains like a storm given flesh, its wings tearing through the thin, dusted air, each beat birthing shockwaves that fractured stone and sundered faith alike. The corrupted battle barge above loosed a rain of fire, drop pods crashing like meteors across the horizon. The custodians formed a radiant wall of gold against the darkness, their halberds humming with sanctified power, but even they, warriors forged to stand against eternity, felt the tremor of something beyond mortal measure. Goku stood at their center, his aura flaring against the encroaching night. The creature before him was vast, its form a nightmare of shifting flesh and twisted armor. The mark of chaos burned deep into its chest. Its eyes burned with malice and recognition, as if it had awaited him since the dawn of corruption itself. "Isso," it growled, its voice rolling through the void like thunder in a cathedral. "The light that walks without faith finally shows its face. Tell me, false angel, which god forged you?" "I don't belong to any god," Goku said quietly, raising his spear. "And I don't need one." The demon's laughter was a wound in the air. "Then you will die alone, as all things that deny divinity must." It spread its arms, and from its palms spilled crimson energy, a torrent of warp fire that consumed everything it touched. The custodians raised their shields, the force of the blast shaking even their divine resolve. Goku moved before thought, golden light flaring around him as he met the inferno head-on. The clash was blinding. Energy tore across the plain, splitting mountains of ash and vaporizing entire battalions of lesser demons caught between. When the light faded, Goku still stood, his armor scorched but unbroken. The custodians looked upon him with silent awe. Valoris' voice cut through the vox, steady but hushed. "By the throne, he endures the warp as if it were mere wind." The demon's grin widened, its jagged teeth glistening with molten blood. "You are not of this reality. I can taste it in your soul. A thing of balance cast into the pit. You will fall as all light must." Goku's expression hardened, and for the first time his kai began to rise, not calm but fierce. The air around him trembled, dust lifting in spirals as his aura burned brighter, gold fading to white at its edges. "You talk too much." He vanished in a burst of light, reappearing behind the demon with a strike that shattered the soundless air. The creature roared as the blow drove it into the lunar surface, sending fragments of moonstones spinning into orbit. The custodians advanced, their formation tightening. Golden lances of energy carved through the lesser spawn that poured from ruptured pods. For a moment it seemed the tide turned, but chaos never relents. From the demon's broken form erupted rivers of blood that twisted into serpents, striking at the warriors like living whips. A custodian fell, his armor melting where the ichor touched. Another's mind burned away in an instant, consumed by the whispers of the warp-born corruption. Goku's fury ignited. He struck again, faster than sight, shattering the serpents, dissolving their vile essence into nothing. His aura erupted skyward, a blazing column visible even from Terra's orbit. Across the void, the astronomer flickered in response, its sacred light strengthening, as if the Emperor himself stirred upon his throne. The demon rose once more, its form cracked and smoldering. You would blind the darkness with your arrogance? You cannot imagine what you defy. It lunged, claws of black steel meeting Goku's spear in a shower of sparks. Each impact bent the land beneath them, warping the void, pulling at reality's seams. The custodians withdrew to a perimeter, their helms tinted gold from the radiance pouring from the two titans. Blow by blow, the battle became less a fight and more a struggle of existence itself, belief against defiance, despair against hope. Goku's every strike sang with intent, each motion born not from hatred but from purpose. And within the demon's laughter for the first time came the faint note of uncertainty. You are not of the Emperor's design, it hissed, staggering back, wings tattered, ichor spilling into the void. And yet you burn with his light. Wanna burn with my own, Goku said, his voice quiet but resolute. He drew in a breath, his power condensing inward, gathering in his palms. Light blazed across the battlefield, golden, fierce, pure, a Kamehameha. The word was foreign to this universe, but the energy it unleashed spoke a language even chaos understood. Finality. The beam struck, overwhelming the demon's form, tearing through its defenses, vaporizing its scream before it could reach the air. When the brilliance subsided, only silence remained. The moon's surface glowed molten for leagues around. The custodians stood motionless, their armor dusted in ash and light. Valoris lowered his spear slowly, watching the radiant figure at the center of the crater. Goku's armor smoked, his breath heavy, but his eyes, clear and unwavering, met Valoris's through the rising heat. The threat is ended, Goku said softly. For now. Valoris nodded, his voice reverent. For now. For now. But even as the words passed, the darkness above began to ripple once more, faint tendrils of warp light curling through the void. The remnants of the battle barge convulsed, and from within its broken hull, a low, echoing laugh spread across the calm net, cold and triumphant. The demon's voice, faint but alive, drifted through the static. You shine brightly, warrior, but every light casts a shadow, and somewhere, deep in the warp, something vast and ancient turned its gaze toward the new star that had dared to burn. In the aftermath of the battle, silence hung over Luna like a shroud. The void was littered with debris, shattered armor, drifting fragments of corrupted metal, and the faint, glowing remnants of demonic essence dissolving into the cold dark. The custodians moved methodically through the wreckage, securing the fallen, retrieving the jaune-sealed banners that had survived the carnage. Yet beneath the stillness, a deeper unease had settled. Something in the warp had stirred, and even the stoic guardians of Terra felt its lingering echo gnawing at the edges of their thoughts. Goku stood at the heart of the crater where the demon prince had fallen. His armor was cracked, streaked with soot and dried blood, but his gaze was fixed beyond the stars. The Kai within him had quieted, but not faded. It pulsed in rhythm with the faint beat of something distant, something watching. He didn't know what it was, only that the victory felt hollow. The enemy had not been defeated. It had only spoken. Valoris approached, his stride steady but his expression drawn. The Captain General's armor was scorched from proximity to the blast, his cloak torn, yet his bearing remained untouched. "The battle is ended," he said, though the words sounded like a ritual rather than a truth. The remnants of the Legion are being purged. No warp breach remains active. Goku nodded slowly, his voice quiet. Then why does it still feel like they're here? Valoris said nothing at first, his gaze drifting toward the void above. Because, he replied at last, they never truly leave. They return to Terra aboard the Eternum Vigil, the flagship of the Custodian Guard. From the command sanctum, Goku looked down upon the blue-white curve of the planet below, now calm, unscarred by the battle beyond its moon. Yet as they descended into the upper atmosphere, Vox channels began to crackle with interference. Psycho wards in the palace flared without command, chanting servitors collapsing into spasms of static. Something was bleeding into reality, not an invasion, but a whisper. By the time they reached the surface, the air within the citadel had grown heavy with a resonance that was not sound but vibration. Deep beneath the palace, in the chambers where the Emperor's psychic presence radiated most strongly, voices began to rise. Faint at first, like wind passing through hollow pipes, then swelling into a terrible harmony that no human throat could produce. The choir of screams. It began with the astropathic choir of the astronomic. One by one, the psychers fused to the great beacon fell to their knees, eyes rolled white, blood spilling from their mouths as unseen forces puppeteered their flesh. Their screams were not of pain but of song, warped, layered, unnatural. They sang of light that burned too brightly, of a flame that dared rival the Emperor's own. The custodians rushed to contain the chamber, erecting null fields and psychic dampeners, but the song did not stop. It echoed through stone and steel, through every soul on terror that still dreamed. Goku felt it before hearing it, the vibration passing through his bones, resonating in the center of his chest like a heartbeat that was not his own. The sound was calling to him. He could feel its source, somewhere beneath the palace, near the buried cathedrals that had been sealed since the Horus heresy. Valoris met him in the descending lift, his face hidden once more behind his helm. The Emperor's seers are convulsing. They claim the Astronomicon itself trembles. Whatever this is, it began the moment you returned from Luna. I didn't bring it, Goku said, his tone firm but uneasy. But maybe it followed me. They emerged into the vaults of the deep sanctum. The air shimmered with psychic distortion, the very walls bleeding faint motes of red light. Custodians formed a perimeter, their armor flickering as the warp energy pressed against reality's edges. At the chamber's center stood the choir. Hundreds of psychers suspended in mid-air, their mouths open, their song a rising, spiraling cry that seemed to fold space itself. Goku stepped forward, ignoring the shouted warnings. His Kai flared instinctively, golden light cutting through the red haze. The voices shifted immediately, their chaotic harmony aligning toward him. They were not random screams anymore. They were words, layered over one another, the same phrase repeated in 1,000 tones. The false sun rises. The custodians' armor systems overloaded. Several fell to one knee under the psychic pressure. Valoris shouted for suppression fields to be strengthened, but the machinery sparked and died, overwhelmed by the sheer psychic resonance. Goku pressed forward, each step heavier than the last, until he stood within reach of the suspended psychers. Their eyes were gone, only glowing voids remained. He reached out. The golden light around him touched theirs, and for a fleeting instant he saw through the warp itself, worlds aflame. Black ships drifting through oceans of blood. The demon prince he had slain reforming in the Imperium, whispering his name to powers older than stars. And beyond even that, a vast coiling darkness, like a god dreaming, watching him from behind a curtain of screams. He staggered back, clutching his head, breath ragged. "They're being used," he gasped. "Their voices. It's not them. It's something using them to talk through me." Valoris steadied him, though his voice was strained beneath the pressure. "What does it want?" Goku looked up, his expression grave. "To see if I'm afraid." The light around him dimmed, his aura flickering as though reacting to the unseen gaze pressing through the veil. The psychers screamed once more in unison, their bodies convulsing before dropping lifelessly to the floor. Silence fell. Then, faint and cold, a whisper drifted through the chamber, carried not by sound but by thought. The Emperor's pet glows bright, but the warp remembers its own. Every lumen flickered out, the darkness was absolute, and from deep within the walls of the palace something vast and ancient began to awaken. The silence that followed was unbearable. It stretched through the chamber like a living thing, thick and suffocating, broken only by the distant hum of failing machinery. The psychers lay scattered across the marble floor, their lifeless forms still faintly glowing from within, as if the echoes of their agony refused to die. Goku stood among them, breath shallow, the golden light around him flickering like a candle in a storm. Valoris watched in grim stillness, his helm reflecting the dim glow of the dead. When the emergency lumen systems finally sputtered back to life, the chamber was bathed in cold white light. Custodians and Mechanicus adepts poured in, sealing the vault with sigils of containment, their chants mechanical and hurried. Goku could feel their suspicion gathering like smoke. The whispers began, quiet at first, then rising behind the closed visors of those who had seen too much. The choir had screamed his name. The Astronomicon had trembled at his return. To the Imperium there were no coincidences, only heresy in disguise. Within the hour he was confined again. Not in chains this time, but in a cell made of blackstone, the same null material that silenced psychers and banished demons. It muted his Kai, smothered the warmth of his energy until only the faintest spark remained within him. He did not resist.
There was nothing to fight. Instead, he sat cross-legged on the floor, eyes closed, trying to steady the rhythm of his breath. The darkness pressed close, but his mind wandered far beyond the walls. He could still hear that voice, faint and distant, whispering from somewhere inside the warp. The false sun rises. When the door opened again, it was not Valoris who entered. 3 figures in black robes stepped through, their symbols unmistakable, inquisitors of the Ordo Hereticus. Behind them came 2 custodians, silent as statues, their weapons ready but lowered. The lead inquisitor, a woman with pale, angular features and a servo skull circling her shoulder, stopped before him. Her gaze was cold enough to pierce the armor he no longer wore. A designation, unknown. Origin, unverified. Power source, anomalous. Her voice was precise, devoid of doubt. You are an unregistered psyker, capable of withstanding null exposure, deflecting warp corruption, and altering matter through will alone. Do you deny this? I'm not a psyker, Goku said quietly. We don't use the warp. Every heretic says the same. She nodded toward the black stone walls. These chambers drain power from even a Primarch's soul, yet you sit here, still radiating energy beyond quantification. How do you explain that? I don't know what to tell you, he replied. Where I come from, energy is part of life. It doesn't come from gods or the warp. It comes from inside. The second inquisitor, older and bearded, leaned forward slightly, eyes narrowed. You speak as if you were free of divine law. Here, all power serves purpose. The Emperor is the source of light. If your energy is not his gift, then it is corruption. Goku opened his eyes. And maybe where you are, light has to belong to someone. But that doesn't make it less real. The room went still. The lead inquisitor's expression hardened, though for a moment there was something like uncertainty behind her eyes. You speak blasphemy with serenity, she said, but perhaps you truly believe it. That makes you more dangerous than those who know they sin. She gestured sharply. The custodians at her side activated their spears. Fields of gold energy hummed through the chamber, casting long shadows across the walls. By decree of the Ordo Hereticus, she continued, you will be subjected to purification, mind, body, and spirit. If your essence resists sanctification, you will be unmade. Goku stood slowly, his movements deliberate. The energy field of the black stone hissed against his skin, but his aura remained faintly visible, golden and calm. I've seen a lot of darkness, he said. And I've fought worse than anything you can imagine. But I've never once believed that fear keeps people safe. Only understanding does. Understanding? The older inquisitor spat the word like venom. There is no understanding between purity and rot. Then maybe that's why your world never stops bleeding. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the custodians paused. The inquisitor's eyes flashed, her composure cracking for an instant before she turned sharply away. You speak like a demon wrapped in virtue, she said coldly. If not for the Emperor's will, you would already be ash. She motioned to the guards, but before they could move, the chamber lights flickered. The black stone walls trembled as a low hum filled the air, not from outside, but from within. The floor began to glow faintly, symbols of ancient design etching themselves into the stone. The null fields screamed as if under pressure from something vast and unseen. Goku's breath caught. He felt it again, that same presence from the choir, closer now, feeding off the fear in the room. The inquisitors shouted orders, activating psychic wards, but their voices were drowned by the rising whisper of 1,000 unseen mouths. The same phrase returned, echoing from every surface, every mind that could still think. The false sun rises. Goku's aura surged instinctively, his body reacting before reason could stop him. The golden light erupted, meeting the dark energy crawling through the stone. For a moment, the world split in two, light against shadow, purity against corruption, neither yielding. The black stone shattered, fragments suspended in mid-air. When the radiance faded, Goku stood alone in the ruined chamber. The inquisitors were gone, whether alive or consumed he couldn't tell. The custodians remained, armor blackened, weapons lowered, their faces pale behind cracked helms. From somewhere deep within the palace, the Emperor's psychic pulse rolled outward like a tide of fire. It silenced the warp's laughter, but not its intent. The whisper faded, yet the warning lingered in Goku's mind, carved there like a scar. The false sun had risen, and the galaxy had begun to notice. In the days that followed the breach of the Blackstone chamber, terror did not sleep. The storm that had begun in whispers now rolled across the stars, a tide of darkness moving with terrible purpose. Astropathic relays screamed into static. Warp routes that had remained stable for millennia flickered and died, their guiding lights snuffed out as if by a single unseen hand. The High Lords convened in secret, their voices trembling behind veils of authority, and the custodians stood vigil in numbers not seen since the days of Horus. Something vast was stirring in the void. From his vantage upon the palace's highest spire, Goku gazed at the heavens. He could feel it, a pressure spreading outward like ripples through water, cold and ancient. It was the same presence that had spoken through the choir, the same voice that had called him a false son. Only now it was no longer whispering, it was awakening. The air itself seemed to hum with dread. Chupi. Below him, the streets of terror were crowded with pilgrims clutching icons and relics, praying louder as the sky dimmed. Faith was their shield, but even faith trembled before the coming night. Valoris approached quietly, his golden armor dulled by ash from the fires that burned across the lower districts. "The segmentum solar is in upheaval," he said, his tone measured but grim. "Reports of coordinated assaults in over 100 systems. The Cadian Gate burns anew." The Eye of Terror expands. Abaddon moves again. "The Black Crusade," Goku said softly. Valoris nodded. "The 13th. His eyes shadowed beneath the crown of his helm met Goku's. "The last time he came, half the Imperium bled before the tide was turned. But this time, something has changed. The warp itself sings his advance, and some among the ecclesiarchy believe that the Emperor's light has faltered." Goku turned his gaze back to the dark horizon, where the Astronomican's beam flickered faintly against the black. "Then we'll need to make sure it doesn't." "You speak as though the light can be tended," Valoris said, a hint of sorrow beneath his iron calm. "The Astronomicon is no flame, it is his will made manifest. If it wanes, it is because even gods grow weary." Goku said nothing. He didn't understand gods, only struggle. Yet as he looked out over the planet that had become the heart of a decaying empire, he saw not only fear but endurance. The people of Terra, millions upon millions, still labored, still prayed, still lived. That, he thought, was light enough to fight for. Without warning, the sky split open. The warp's veil tore above the planet like a wound in reality, vast and luminous with corruption. The Astronomicon flared in response, its holy light burning through the clouds, colliding with a shadow until both forces wavered and screamed. Bolts of warp lightning arced across the heavens, striking the upper spires of the palace. Vox networks overloaded. Custodians raced to reinforce the sanctum gates as the palace itself shook under the unseen strain. Then came the voice, loud enough to drown the world. It rolled through the warp and the material alike, carried on psychic resonance that shattered minds and cracked stone. It was laughter, endless and cruel, rising from beyond the Eye of Terror. Every astropath within 100 systems heard it and wept blood. Even the Emperor's silent throne seemed to hum in grim acknowledgement. The false sun burns, and the Emperor's heart flickers. Let the age of gods end, and the age of dominion begin. The sound tore through Goku's mind like a blade. He staggered, clutching his head, visions flooding his senses, worlds consumed by flame, fleets engulfed by living storms, chaos banners unfurling across the stars. At the center of it all stood Abaddon the Despoiler, his clawed gauntlet raised, the mark of chaos undivided blazing in triumph. Around him, legions of traitor marines roared in worship. Valoris steadied him, though his own voice trembled beneath the weight of what he saw. This is no prophecy. It is declaration. The Black Crusade is no longer advancing toward the Imperium. It is coming for Terra itself. The Custodians' Vox relays flared to life with overlapping reports. Demonic incursions in the Sol system, fleets emerging from warp storms near Jupiter, Vox silence across Mars. The Mechanicus forges had gone dark. Even the moon that Goku had defended days before now glowed faintly red, its surface corrupted anew. The Captain General turned to him. "You were not born of this galaxy," he said, his words heavy as oaths. "And yet it seems its fate now hinges upon your presence. The warp has marked you, whether as weapon or warning. Tell me, champion of light, what do you intend to do?" Goku stared into the rift burning above them, its endless depth filled with screaming light. The air vibrated with both terror and resolve. "If it's darkness they want," he said quietly, "then I'll meet it head on." Valoris regarded him for a long moment before speaking. "Then you are one of us now." A sudden tremor rippled through the ground. The throne's psychic field surged outward, vast and furious like a heartbeat echoing through the void. The Astronomicon blazed brighter than ever before. as though the Emperor himself had risen to meet the challenge. Across the galaxy, every loyal ship and world turned its gaze toward Terra. But the message was silent but clear. The war for the Imperium had begun anew, and far beyond the veil, in the roiling storm of the eye, Abaddon smiled as the legions of chaos answered his call. The 13th Black Crusade was no longer a campaign, it was prophecy fulfilled. And somewhere deep within the heart of the warp, the shadow that had spoken through the choir stirred once more, whispering into the void. The false sun rises, and soon the true one will fall. The stars burned crimson as the warp tore open around the Sol system. Reality groaned under the strain, space itself convulsing as demonic storms surged across the void. Entire fleets vanished into rifts of impossible geometry, their crews screaming prayers that went unanswered. Amid the chaos, the golden armada of the Custodes held formation, its ships gleaming like fragments of the Emperor's light cast against eternity, and at their heart aboard the Eternum Vigil stood Goku, his gaze fixed upon the endless dark ahead, where the shadow waited. The warp rift pulsed vast and alive, a wound bleeding corruption into the void. From its depths, a single vessel emerged, black, barbed, and vast enough to dwarf mountains. Its hull burned with unholy runes, and upon its prow stood the figure that had haunted every vision since the choir's fall. The demon prince had returned, reborn and remade, its broken wings replaced by constructs of burning iron, its body now a fusion of flesh, machine, and chaos itself. Its voice carried across the void like thunder rolling through eternity. "You shine still, little sun," it said, each word vibrating through the hulls of ships and the minds of men. "You were forged to protect a dying god, yet even your light cannot pierce the abyss. Come then, prove your divinity, or burn with your emperor." Valoris stood beside Goku, helm removed, his scarred face reflecting the red glow of the void. "That creature is no longer bound by the laws of existence," he said quietly. "It bleeds from the immaterium into the real. Even the Emperor's light may not hold it long." Goku's eyes narrowed. "Then I'll fight it out there, where it began." Before Valoris could answer, Goku stepped forward, his body lifting from the ship's surface, golden light wreathing him like the dawn. He drifted into the void, the auramite armor glowing with energy that defied the cold silence of space. Each movement was fluid, deliberate, filled with the calm of one who had already accepted the cost of what must be done. The demon prince extended its clawed hand, and the stars around them distorted, dragged into spirals of corruption. They met in the center of that maelstrom. The first impact tore soundless waves through the void. Light and shadow clashed in silence so profound it shook the perception of those who watched from afar. Goku's golden aura blazed brighter, countering the demon's warp fire, the two forces grinding against each other like colliding realities. Fragments of ruined ships drifted past, vaporized by the sheer force of their conflict. The demon struck with speed that belied its monstrous size, its claws cutting through the void like scythes of darkness. Each blow warped the fabric of space, shattering asteroids into dust. Goku parried and countered, his spear now an extension of his will, each strike carving radiant arcs through the black. Yet even as his power flared, he could feel the weight of the warp pressing closer, feeding on every emotion, every thought. The demon's laughter echoed in his mind. "You wield a power untouched by chaos, and yet you stand within its cradle," it hissed. "How long before the void devours you too? How long before your light becomes another weapon of the gods you despise?" Goku's answer came through gritted teeth, his voice steady despite the pressure crushing his chest. "As long as it takes to stop you." He struck forward, channeling his Kai into the spear's tip. The golden energy erupted outward, tearing through the demon's chest in a burst of light that split the void. For a fleeting moment, silence returned. Then the creature's body convulsed, its wounds spilling not blood but darkness, a storm of screaming faces that swarmed toward him. They struck like living shadows, clawing at his mind, whispering words that dripped like poison. He felt their sorrow, their rage, their endless hunger. Souls devoured by chaos, bound to its will. For an instant his light faltered, compassion dragging him toward despair. The demon's voice slithered through the din. "You pity them. Then you are weaker than I thought. There is no mercy here, only the void and those who learn to rule it." Goku closed his eyes. The voices pressed harder, but in their cries he found something else, a memory. The faces of those he had saved, the laughter of those who had once believed the world could still be good. It was faint, but it was enough. His aura flared once more, burning brighter than ever, his energy resonating through the screaming tide. "I don't fight to rule," he said quietly. "Lee fights so they don't have to." The explosion that followed could be seen from Terra. Golden light consumed the void, swallowing the demon's form, ripping apart the shadows until nothing remained but silence and drifting ash. The warp tier above the system shuddered, its edges collapsing inward as the Astronomican's beam surged to meet it, sealing the wound with fire and faith. When the brilliance faded, Goku floated amidst the wreckage, his armor cracked, his breath shallow. The demon's presence was gone, but the warp had not retreated. Instead, it coiled around him, whispering softly, not in threat but in curiosity, as though taking measure of the thing that had defied it. Valoris' voice broke through the calm, distant and reverent. "The breach is closing. You did it. Terra stands." Goku's eyes remained fixed on the fading storm. "No," he murmured. "It's just watching, waiting." And as he drifted back toward the fleet, the last trace of the demon's laughter echoed faintly through the dying winds of the warp. It was quieter now, almost respectful, but still filled with promise. The light endures, but only because the dark allows. The void was quiet again, but it was not peace. The light of the Astronomicon pulsed faintly through the black, no longer steady, as though the galaxy itself struggled to breathe. The warp wound was sealed, yet its residue clung to reality like smoke after fire. The custodian fleets drifted in defensive formation around Terra, their once gleaming hulls scarred and dimmed by battle. The surviving warriors of the Imperium hailed the victory as divine, but Goku felt no triumph, only weight. Every pulse of his Kai felt heavier now, dulled by exhaustion, and something deeper he could not name. When he returned to the surface, the sky over the Imperial Palace was red with dust and re-entry fire. Hundreds of thousands had witnessed the celestial blaze that marked the duel's end, and already the Ministerum's preachers called it a miracle, proof that the Emperor had sent forth a golden champion to renew his dominion. Statues were raised within hours, prayers rewritten to include the nameless warrior of light. Goku walked through the vast courtyards in silence, watching pilgrims fall to their knees as he passed. Each word of praise struck him harder than any demon's blood. Valoris accompanied him to the inner sanctum, his armor newly polished but his voice subdued. "The people see your victory as a sign," he said. "They believe the Emperor has chosen you as his vessel. The Ecclesiarch himself petitions to canonize your name among the saints." "Boo." "I'm not a saint," Goku replied quietly. "I didn't do this for faith." "Then for what?" Valoris asked. Goku paused at the base of the long stairway leading toward the golden throne. The doors ahead towered beyond sight, carved with 10,000 scenes of conquest and martyrdom. He stared at them for a long time before answering. "For life," he said. "For the chance that maybe something better can still exist." Valoris studied him through the impassive mask of his helm, then inclined his head. "Then perhaps that is why he watches you now." The throne room was silent when they entered. The light was dimmer than before, as if the golden radiance of the Emperor's psychic aura had withdrawn into itself. The custodians lined the hall in perfect stillness, their spears lowered in reverence. Even the air seemed frozen, heavy with the presence of something ancient and immense. Goku approached slowly. The closer he came, the more oppressive the air became, like the weight of entire worlds pressing upon his chest. He could hear faint whispers at the edge of perception, echoes of prayers, fragments of thought, the collective mind of mankind reaching toward its God. He stopped at the foot of the throne, where the Emperor's body sat unmoving, a monument of flesh and machine entwined. His aura, once blinding, now flickered faintly, like embers beneath ash. For a long time there was nothing, no sound, no movement, only the hum of the life-sustaining mechanisms surrounding the corpse god. Goku bowed his head, uncertain whether he was speaking to a living being or a dying echo. "I did what I could," he said softly. "The rift is closed, but I don't think it's over. Whatever that thing was, it's still out there. It called me the false sun." He hesitated, the words catching in his throat. "I don't even know why I'm here. Maybe I never will. Maybe I never will. But if you brought me to this world, tell me what I'm supposed to do next." Silence answered him. It stretched until it became unbearable. Goku's fists tightened at his sides, his voice rising despite himself. "You can hear me, can't you? You've watched your people die for 10,000 years, waiting for a miracle that never comes. You have the power to move stars, and you do nothing. Why?" The custodians shifted uneasily, but Valoris raised a hand, stilling them. The Emperor's body did not stir. Only the faint psychic wind that filled the chamber grew colder. Goku stepped forward, the golden light of his aura trembling. "If you can't save them," he said, his voice breaking, "then I will." And then it came, a presence vast and wordless, filling the space around him like a rising tide. It was not sound but understanding, a thought that entered his mind as if it had always been there. "You do not comprehend what you ask." The voice was not cruel nor kind. It was ancient, so heavy with sorrow that it pressed against the soul like gravity. Goku dropped to one knee, breath catching in his chest. "Then tell me," he whispered, "show me why." Images flooded his mind, worlds burning beneath chaos banners, endless legions dying in the Emperor's name, a humanity so fractured it could only survive through fear. And behind it all the Emperor himself, bound to the throne, not as ruler but as prisoner. Goku saw the truth. The god mankind worshipped was chained by his own necessity. To let go was to abandon them. To act was to unmake them. The vision shattered, leaving him trembling. The voice faded to a whisper. "You burn with a light not born of faith. Guard it well, it will die as all things must. But before it fades, it may yet show them what they have forgotten." The chamber dimmed once more, the silence returning with crushing finality. Goku rose slowly, his eyes reflecting the dim glow of the throne. There was no triumph left in them, only understanding. He turned to Valoris, his voice low but steady. "He's not silent because he doesn't care," he said. "He's silent because he's trapped." Valoris said nothing. The custodians lowered their heads in solemn respect as Goku passed, his footsteps fading into the echoing vastness of the hall. Outside, the sky over Terra burned with the reflection of 1,000 ships preparing for war. The Black Crusade was advancing, and the Imperium's faith wavered between hope and dread. But somewhere within that uncertainty, a new resolve was forming, a light neither divine nor human, but something in between. And in the stillness of the throne room, the Emperor's aura flickered once, almost imperceptibly, like a dying flame remembering the warmth of the sun. The wind over Terra's palace walls carried the scent of incense and burning metal. The city below was restless. Millions of pilgrims flooding the streets, their prayers clashing like waves in a storm. The stories of the Golden Warrior had spread across the Imperium faster than any edict. They called him a savior, a divine herald, the Emperor's living will made flesh. But Goku stood apart from the noise, alone atop the highest parapet, watching the endless horizon where the stars burned faintly through the planet's smog. He did not feel like a savior. He felt like a stranger who had come too far to return. The armor he wore now was quiet. Its once living glow had faded to a dim gold, reflecting the dying light of the day. He sat cross-legged upon the cold stone, closing his eyes as he drew a slow breath. Beneath the layers of battle, the weight of victory and blood, he sought silence, the same stillness that had grounded him in every world, every fight. But even in meditation, he could not escape the whispers that lingered after the Emperor's voice. He had seen truth. The god that humanity worshipped was not cruel, but bound, a being of immeasurable power locked in eternal endurance. To free him would mean to unmake the Imperium. To leave him would mean to let it decay slowly, feeding upon its own faith until nothing remained. Between those fates stood Goku, a spark from another reality caught in a war without end. He could feel the Emperor's thoughts like distant thunder beneath his consciousness, neither commands nor pleas, only the slow heartbeat of a being who had forgotten rest. Below, the custodians stood at their posts, silent and unmoving. Valoris had not spoken since the audience in the throne room. He had seen Goku's face as he emerged, a mixture of resolve and mourning, and had understood something had changed. No more orders were given, no proclamations followed. Even the High Lords, for all their vanity, seemed to sense the shift in the air as if some unseen tide had turned. The Astronomican's beam flickered again, weaker now, its brilliance waning against the encroaching dark. Goku opened his eyes. The stars seemed closer here, brighter and yet cold. He could feel the tremors of the warp moving beyond them, vast and alive. The demon prince was gone, but not defeated. The shadow that had spoken through it still lingered, patient and hungry. He could almost hear its laughter on the edge of perception. Every victory was temporary, every light eventually consumed. He understood now that the Imperium's greatest enemy was not chaos, it was despair. He rose slowly, the auramite plates shifting with soft metallic sighs. "So this is what it means to be eternal," he murmured to himself. "Or to keep fighting after there's nothing left to win." The words held no bitterness, only weary wonder. He thought of his home, of friends who had laughed without fear, of skies untainted by smoke and faith. They felt impossibly far away, like dreams belonging to another soul. Yet even now, the same impulse that had carried him through 1,000 battles still burned within, to protect, to believe, even when belief seemed futile. A faint presence stirred behind him. Valoris approached, his steps measured but softer than before. He stopped at a respectful distance. "The fleets gather," he said quietly. "The Despoiler's vanguard moves upon Mars. The Black Legion grows stronger with every hour. The High Lords await your command." Goku did not turn. Goku did not turn. "I'm not their commander," Valoris hesitated. "They already follow you. You've become what the Imperium has always needed. Something to believe in. Whether you wish it or not, faith clings to you." "A faith," Goku said softly, his gaze still fixed upon the horizon, "isn't what will save them." "Then what will?" He looked down at his hands, scarred and steady, reminding them that they can still choose. Valoris said nothing. There was no doctrine for such words, no prayer to echo them. But in that silence, something passed between the two men, a recognition beyond rank or creed. They were both servants of a light they could not see, fighting for a tomorrow neither might survive to witness. As the sun dipped below the edge of the world, Goku closed his eyes once more. He let the noise of the city fade into nothing, the hum of the throne recede to a distant pulse. For the first time since his arrival, he felt still, not victorious, not certain, but present. Within that stillness, he reached inward past the armor and the exhaustion, to the quiet core of his being where his Kai shimmered faintly, like a heartbeat of pure light. He spoke not aloud, but into the silence between worlds. "If you can hear me, if any of this still matters, then let this power mean something. Not just for war, not just for survival, for peace." The air grew still, the stars brightened for a heartbeat, and then the moment passed. "Well." Valoris bowed his head, the gesture solemn. "You seek peace," he said. "Yet the galaxy offers only war." Goku's voice was calm. "Then I'll carry it with me until it learns." The last rays of sunlight faded from the marble walls, leaving only the pale glow of the Astronomicon far above. Goku stood alone again, the shadow of his figure cast long and thin against the endless expanse of Terra's night. The quiet stretched around him, not empty but waiting. The stars flickered in response, as if listening. And somewhere within the golden throne, unseen and eternal, the Emperor's pulse quickened, just once, as if in acknowledgement. The night above Terra did not last. Before dawn could reach the horizon, the sky split once more. Not with flame this time, but with darkness so absolute it devoured light itself. The air trembled, Vox networks screamed with static, and across the Sol system, 1,000 ships fell silent in orbit. The Astronomicon faltered, its golden beam flickering to a pulse that echoed like a dying heartbeat. From Mars to Luna, psychers collapsed, clutching their heads as visions of black suns and bleeding constellations flooded their minds. The shadow that had lingered in the void had come for its due. Goku stood on the palace wall, his gaze fixed upon the heavens as the stars vanished one by one. He could feel it approaching, a wave of energy colder than death, vast and endless. The ground beneath his feet hummed with dread. Valoris arrived beside him, flanked by his custodians, their armor gleaming dully in the starlight that remained. "The warp storms are converging," he said, his voice tight. "All calms are down. Even the Emperor's beacon wavers. Whatever this is, it seeks to drown the Astronomicon itself." Goku's aura stirred faintly, gold whispering beneath the gloom. "Then it's not after the galaxy," he said quietly. "It's after him." Valoris turned, his expression unreadable beneath the helm. "The throne is fortified beyond mortal measure. Not even a god could breach its wards." Goku shook his head. "This isn't strength, it's hunger. It doesn't need to breach, it only needs to feed." And then the air screamed. Reality tore apart above them, opening like a wound that bled both time and meaning. From within, shapes emerged. Not ships, but shadows given form, each a fragment of the same vast will. Demons poured through the rift in silence, their bodies molten and unformed, twisting into monstrous parodies of angels. The custodians raised their weapons, prayers of activation echoing like thunder, and the first volley of bolter fire ignited the darkness. But it was like shooting light into an ocean. Goku's aura flared, shattering the stillness with a golden roar. He leapt from the battlements, landing amidst the oncoming tide. Every motion was a burst of radiance, every strike a sun colliding with shadow. The demons that touched his light dissolved into ash, yet more came, Thousands, endless, crawling across the sky and palace walls like living night. The warp howled with their hunger. Valoris and his custodians fought at his flank, their halberds slicing arcs of gold through the black swarm. But the shadow grew denser, pressing closer with each heartbeat. For every abomination slain, 2 more took its place, birthed from the screaming rift above vibrated a heart. Even Goku's power began to strain beneath the weight of it. The air thickened with the taste of iron and ozone. His aura flickered once, then steadied again, brighter than before. He looked to the heavens where the rift pulsed like a black heart. The energy pouring from it was unlike any he had felt. It wasn't chaos or hatred or even will. It was absence, a perfect void that consumed all meaning. And at its core, he saw something vast and terrible taking shape, a figure of impossible scale, its body formed from the remnants of broken stars, its eyes twin abysses. It was the demon reborn, no longer a prince, but something closer to the essence of the warp itself. The false sun, the voice thundered through every mind, every soul. Your light is a wound upon the void. Come and be unmade. The custodians fell back as the ground split apart, magma and darkness spilling from the fractures. Goku rose above it, his eyes burning with calm fury. You want the light. You want the light, he said softly. Then you'll have it. The energy within him ignited, not in anger, but in surrender. The barrier between his ki and the psychic resonance of the galaxy thinned until the two became one. The air shimmered, reality bending under the force that poured from him. His body was no longer merely human. It was a vessel of raw essence, his aura blazing like a second sun over Terra. The demons recoiled, hissing as their forms burned to vapor beneath the radiance. Even Valoris shielded his eyes, the gold of his armor paling under the brightness. Goku rose higher, into the sky where the rift hung open, his voice carried on the light itself. You said every light casts a shadow, he whispered. And maybe that's true. But even a shadow needs something to stand against. He thrust both hands forward, the chi surged outward, merging with the Emperor's failing beacon. For a heartbeat the astronomican flared, not gold, but pure white, washing across the galaxy like the first dawn. The warp screamed in protest as its tides reversed, demonic forms unraveling into dust and silence. The great rift above Terra buckled, folding inward as though devoured by its own collapse. The shadow shrieked, a sound that split the mind and the void alike. Its vast body cracked, splintered, and finally shattered under the torrent of light, and in that last instant when its form began to fade, its voice reached him once more. Not hateful, but almost reverent. Light consumed everything, city, sky, and space, spreading outward until even darkness had no place left to hide. When it was over, Terra stood bathed in dawn. The rift was gone. The sky was clear for the first time in 10,000 years. The astronomican burned steady once more, its beam brighter than ever. But where Goku had stood there was only silence. Valoris searched the skies until his vision blurred, but no golden figure descended. Only motes of light drifted on the wind, glowing softly like fireflies before fading into the morning air. The custodians bowed their heads, not in defeat but in reverence. And far within the palace the Emperor's pulse flared, bright, steady, alive. For the first time in an age, his light burned with warmth. The false sun was gone, but the dawn he had left behind would endure. In the aftermath of the storm, Terra lay in quiet reverence. The great spires of the imperial palace stood untouched, though the air still shimmered faintly with the residue of power that defied any known measure. The sun, once dimmed by the constant smog of faith and war, now burned clear and bright across the horizon. For the first time in living memory, its light reached the lowest tiers of the hive cities, painting broken marble and rusted steel in gold. Pilgrims wandered the streets in silence, some laughing, some weeping, all of them feeling something they could not name. The shadows that had haunted their world were gone, but so too was the one who had driven them away. In the upper halls of the palace, the custodians walked among the remnants of battle. Their armor bore new scars, their banners still stained from the siege, but none spoke of sorrow. They moved with a solemn pride, as though guarding something greater than the throne itself, the memory of the light they had witnessed. Valoris stood at the edge of the grand balcony, overlooking the endless ocean of humanity below. His helm rested beneath his arm, his expression distant yet peaceful. He had led 1,000 campaigns, buried 1,000 legends, but never had he seen one born and end so swiftly. Below him, the chants began again. It started with a handful of voices, faint against the wind, then swelled until the sound became a wave that reached even the highest towers. They called not to the Emperor, but to the nameless warrior who had burned brighter than dawn. They spoke of the false sun who had come from the stars and vanished into them again. In their stories, he was no longer foreign. He was the Emperor's lost champion, the final light sent to rekindle faith. Valoris closed his eyes. He could not silence their devotion, nor did he wish to. He had seen the truth in that light and knew it belonged to no god. Yet in a galaxy built upon belief, truth was less enduring than hope. Perhaps, he thought, that was how it was meant to be. Far beneath him, deep within the labyrinthine vaults of the palace, the Emperor's light burned steady and strong. The machinery of the throne hummed with a vigor not felt since the age of apostasy. Tech priests whispered of anomalies in the energy conduits, fluctuations that resonated not with the warp, but with something entirely new. Some said it was an echo of the battle that had sealed the rift. Others dared to claim that the Emperor himself had stirred. Whatever the cause, the Astronomicon blazed across the stars with renewed brilliance, guiding ships through the void as if a hand unseen steadied their course. And yet beyond the reach of any ship or prayer, something else lingered. Among the currents of the Imperium, where the veil between realities thinned, a faint glimmer drifted through the void. It was not the warp's fire nor the Emperor's flame, but something gentler, an energy neither divine nor corrupted. The light moved with purpose, cutting through the screaming chaos, calm and unafraid. The demons that sensed it recoiled in confusion, for it did not burn with hate, only peace. The light passed through battlefields unseen, through worlds swallowed by shadow, and wherever it touched, the warp stilled for a heartbeat. On forgotten planets where humanity still prayed to distant stars, the faithful began to dream of a man in gold who smiled without fear. They saw him standing in the void, his hand raised not in war, but in blessing. Those dreams spread quiet and untraceable, carried from mind to mind like a whisper. Generations later, the story of the Golden Warrior would take form in song and scripture. He would be called the Custodian of Dawn, the saint beyond faith, the protector who came when the Emperor slept. The ecclesiarchy would rewrite his deeds 1,000 times, each retelling grander than the last. But among the custodians, his name would never be spoken as myth. They remembered him as he truly was, a stranger who had asked nothing, given everything, and vanished before the universe could understand what he had done. Valoris often returned to the balcony in the years that followed. He would watch the light of the Astronomicon pulse against the stars and remember the day the sky had burned clean. Sometimes, when the wind was still and the city's hymns softened to a hum, he thought he could feel a faint warmth on his armor, like sunlight breaking through clouds. And though he never spoke it aloud, he always bowed his head, not in worship, but in gratitude. Deep within the throne room, the Emperor's presence stirred once more. A pulse rippled through the psychic sea, faint but deliberate, resonating through the great machinery of the palace. It was not command nor wrath, it was acknowledgement. The kind of silence that follows when one remembers something long forgotten. Across the galaxy, new stars were catalogued where none had existed before. Some shone brighter than others, fleeting and untamed. And among them, one glowed faintly gold, its light steady against the void. Those who studied it named it Solis Ultima, the final sun. And though no one could hear it, the void itself seemed to whisper, as if repeating a truth older than gods. The light had not perished, it had simply gone home.